Truth Espresso, episode 183.
Face it, we all would rather sleep in this morning. That's why God gave us espresso, to kickstart our zombified corpses into hyperdrive. And now, giving your mind and soul the morning shot of truth it craves. This is Truth Espresso with Daniel Minnick.
Hey there, welcome to Truth Espresso, all you friends, family, foes, and lurkers. This is your host, Daniel Minnick, and along with my sweet, beautiful co-host and wife, Chelsea. Thank you for doing this with me again, sweetheart.
Yeah, thank you for letting me join in with you.
And we are going through Pride Month, kind of this month, as it's so-called Pride Month. We are covering some topics and some news that's been coming out with Pride Month related to it. And yeah, there's just so much. It'd be like drinking from a fire hose trying to cover everything, so we can't do that. We got to be a little bit selective here. But we pull some articles of interest to try to make some points about what's going on, some biblical points about the confusion that Pride Month brings and its attack on God's design. And so last episode, we went over the Drag the Kids to Pride event in Texas. And we're going to start off with an article talking about more drag, and then we'll get into trans stuff and some ways how they're different, how they're related, but especially how they're related to destroying children, destroying the definition of really what is a woman, and I know Matt Walsh made a documentary about that. That's kind of his search to an answer to that simple question, and we're going to kind of get into that same question with all this confusion. And so the first article I'd like to get at is one reported by MetroWeekly.com. We'll put a link to this in the show notes. And it's interesting, as I was trying to research articles on this particular event, there's almost no article, unless it came from like a Christian source reporting on it, that showed any favoritism toward the other side. It was almost like, can you believe these freaks who didn't show acceptance to the drag queens here? And so a library in California was hosting a drag queen story hour where drag queens are invited in to do story hour. Now, story hour in libraries has been around for a while. If you're a grandparent or if you have grandparents, they could tell you about maybe some of the story hours that they've attended in a library, and it's been, just kind of an innocuous thing where maybe a dad or a mom or a school teacher might just read books to kids, and it was kind of a way to have kids learn things and be entertained through something totally innocuous here, but that's being replaced a lot by drag queens reading books to children in libraries. And so on this event, this California library, some protesters actually entered the library and disrupted the event. And so with the last week's episode, we talked about one protester who was kind of heckled outside. But in this one, a group of several protesters actually entered the library and disrupted the event. And so they were basically asking the parents why they're letting this happen. Why are they letting these men dressed like women read stories to their kids, especially if they know what these drag people are like? So I want to read a few statements from this article and just kind of comment on it a little bit, because the article does kind of raise some questions, raise some points. So, according to the article, quote, local police and prosecutors have launched a hate crime investigation after several members of the right-wing group The Proud Boys barged into and disrupted a drag queen story hour event at a library in San Lorenzo, California, unquote. So the articles, when I was researching this event, most of the articles would refer to a hate crime. And it's kind of interesting when you think about it. Like, what do we usually think of hate crimes being? It's usually like if someone does something racist, says something racist. Usually it's associated with race or, ethnicity. Now, some people might consider attacks against homosexuals as hate crimes, but this is the first time that I've ever read about a hate crime pertaining to drag queens.
It seemed like when you read the article that the men that went in there were trying to warn the parents and kind of help the parents think through, like, why are you letting your kids be in here? This is, who these people typically are. And it was like, okay, they're trying to help protect these kids and other people in there. So, it's interesting how it got twisted so quickly to being a hate crime.
Yeah, because I listened to a video of the actual event here. And, so reading the articles covering this, they're talking about how they're making violent threats and people were afraid of the violence. And of course, like talking about like throwing hateful slurs and stuff. Like, okay, so these guys, they used a slang term for them, but then mostly they kept using the word pedophile and telling the parents, like, so why are you bringing your children? There's a pedophile here. Why are you bringing your children to have a pedophile read to them? It seemed like the parents would give excuses that were kind of a diversion, and these guys are trying to get them to answer a simple question, kind of like a prove me wrong type thing, like, who these people are. Why are you bringing your children to have them read books to them? Like, just, what these people do. What are you doing?
Now, I was trying to look up, because I know there's a lot of controversy between transgender people and the drags, because they're saying like there's a stark difference between them. And so looking that up, it seems like the drag queens are typically the guys. I mean, there are drag kings, but it's not like as popular as the drag queens. So it's typically guys just trying to, in a gross way, like have fun. Like, okay, they're not necessarily thinking like, oh, deep down inside, I'm really a woman and need to go through all these changes. And it's just guys like trying to get away with as much as they can, trying to like make fun of women and what women are portrayed as. And so, of course, they're going to be more of your typical pedophile and someone like trying to get access to children and women. And that's why this should be on such high alert for parents and for, I mean, even police officers to step in and do something and not get frustrated that these men are going in and trying to stop that. There's probably a sexual offender in here.
And of course, once again, the police, when they're involved, now this is California. I know the last week's one about the drag the kids to Pride, where they weren't there to read books, but the police were, of course, acting more against the protesters there. And once again, in this case, since it say the police launched a hate crime investigation, obviously the police care more about the drag queens than they do about the kids.
And that's a huge problem. I mean, for those kids that are in abusive homes or in bad situations now, it's like you can't even trust law enforcement or rational people. Well, okay, maybe I shouldn't say they're rational people. But before you could kind of count on some of these people to step up and be like, hey, no, we need to protect these kids. We need to get them out of here and have these safety measures in place. And now I feel that all of that has gone to the wayside because they're trying so hard to protect the agenda of the trans and drags.
Agenda of grooming children. Because this isn't, as much as people want to give the excuse that this isn't just some harmless thing. You know, the intention of these drags are to groom children. That's why they set up this organization. That's why they want to do this. That's why they want to meet children, get children used to them, and think of them as like just harmless, you know, women types or looking like women. Yeah. But yeah, as we look into this, we'll have some interesting questions to think about, kind of food for thought, kind of thought experiment here. But yeah, you mentioned, sweetheart, I want to read another little piece of this article. So it says, quote, attacks against the LGBTQ community and the drag community, which is often mistakenly conflated with the transgender community, have increased across the country, unquote. So it's trying to say, this is yet another attack against the LGBTQ community. But it's interesting. At first, I was thinking they were including the drags in this, but it says against the LGBTQ community and the drag community. But then it's like, wait, what about the drag the kids to Pride last week when, okay, so I'm guessing, so Pride isn't just about the LGBTQ community, it includes drag or something, you know? But whatever the case, I'm guessing the drags aren't included in the alphabet soup there, but but it's interesting that it's like says often mistakenly conflated. So drag queens are often mistaken for transgender, and you know, I wonder why. I mean, you know, because it seems like one of those kind of fine lines, because if supposedly people can identify as a different gender than your biology says about you, why can't we consider drag queens as transgendered? Because there's also the term that they use about transitioning, which usually involves physical changes, puberty blockers, things like that, to try to make you physically look more like how you identify. But aren't there transgender people who haven't transitioned yet? You know, as is claimed, like, okay, some of them figure out allegedly who they are, and then they have to eventually go through the transition period, but they don't claim to not be transgendered until they've transitioned, right? Because it's like whatever you identify as. So, I mean, are we trying to say that drag queens, because they don't claim to identify as the women they try to appear as, that really is the distinction between them and non-transition transgender women, whatever? So it's all about, okay, it's the only difference can be whether you just verbally affirm what you identify as.
Yeah, it gets very confusing.
Yeah. And we're supposed to accept so much stuff as norm when it keeps on changing, and words keep on changing meanings. Dictionaries have to keep on being updated every 5 minutes. And yeah, anyone who can't keep up with this, you know, is potentially a bigot or committing a hate crime or whatever, you know.
But I think that's the whole goal for most people with this and supporting it, is that they want it to be vague. They want it to keep changing and be whatever you want it to be, because they have no absolutes.
Yeah.
And they're just trying to contradict anything and everything that God says and how God even made us. And it's just one huge deception. Yeah. And you can just see how evil and deceptive Satan has been working in the hearts and minds of people, and it's just sickening that it's starting to affect young children and just even safety for women now. It's just horrible.
Yeah, it's like the postmodern war on words, the complete breakdown and destruction of language. Words no longer have meaning. It's what especially the political elites determine is the definition of words. And here's a point about that, because of the final quote that I want to get from this article. Quote, Panda Dulce, the drag queen who was reading at the San Lorenzo library, says the incident leaves her feeling unsafe, even in her own home. but she doesn't want to be a victim and allow fear to stop her from doing what she loves, unquote. So we saw in the article before that drag queens are confused for transgender people. And what is the difference between them technically is identity, right? Or something like that. So I'm confused. And now drag queens are referred to with female pronouns. So how do we, I don't know, identify these people? And we're just told that they're often confused, but, well, how do we not confuse them if we have to use the same pronouns? You know, I'm confused. Someone please help me here.
Did you see the picture of that drag queen?
Yeah.
All right. That person is very manly looking, like for a woman.
Yeah.
And I just could not help but laugh when they said that this person was afraid.
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm like, man, I think that it could easily take out some men.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting that they're trying to be all wimpy and
well, that's their source of power, is to use the power of the state and their victimhood, you know. So, yeah. If they were to exercise any of the power that they could have of themselves, that would destroy their political power. So,
but like, it's just so demeaning to women.
Oh, yeah, and that's what I want to get into. Oh, yeah, for sure.
Because, all right, yeah, of course, women get scared if, like, a bunch of guys are making threats and stuff. But there are so many trainings and different things to help women learn how to defend herself and how to stand up against men. And so I'm like, okay, if a woman in that situation would not have acted like that.
Oh, yeah.
So it's just like so just in your face and disgracing women and who women are.
I'm sure this Panda Dulce, you know, knew full well that these guys weren't gonna threaten physically or anything like that. It's all political ploy to try to silence critics, because what they really fear is exposure and threats to shut down their profession. That's what they're scared of, you know.
Yeah.
So... Now, I want to do a little thought experiment here, because we're talking about drag and transgender and stuff. So remember that I mentioned that a hate crime was being investigating in these Proud Boys guys disrupting and, as I mentioned, like referring to the drag as a pedophile and stuff like that. And so the police are investigating a hate crime against drag queens, and said that's the first time I've ever heard of that kind of thing. I don't know of any hate crimes legislation that actually put drag in the definition of it, but, you know, when words can change meaning, politics can change. I guess written laws themselves probably don't even matter now, you know, that's just completely fluid. But so men who decide to dress like women but still identify as men are their own protected class of people. You know, is that what we're saying here? That's, you know, if I were somehow to just put a wig on, you know, or long-haired wig and put makeup on and try to appear to look more feminine, do I become a protected minority class of people for which anyone who would criticize me is committing a hate crime? You know, like it's bizarre.
Yes. Thank you for not trying that. Oh, goodness.
I'm trying to show that, okay, a simple little costume makes people some kind of class of people. Like, I just don't know how to deal with this, except for this thought experiment that I thought of. So let's do this thought experiment, because I'm going to compare drags to some other people and make us wonder if these other people could also qualify as a protected class. So let's think of some men whose job it is to dress up in baggy clothes, wear a colored wig and makeup, and perform in front of kids. would these people be considered their own class of people and potentially be a protected minority class? Well, what I've described to you are clowns. Ronald McDonald, or the clown that might perform at some birthday parties and make kids laugh and scare some other ones. But, now, how about men whose job it is to dress up in female clothes and wear a long-haired wig and cake on some gothic-looking makeup and perform in front of kids? Are they a protected class of people? Well, these are what we just talked about. We call them drag queens, but I describe them in a way that there's a lot of similarities with clowns there. They dress in certain type of clothes. They put on a wig, just like a clown dresses in baggy clothes, puts on some colored wig, puts on makeup. They perform in front of kids. But no one has ever thought of hate crimes against clowns or that there's some kind of special class of people. Now, clowns certainly get little love. No one really respects or reverences clowns. People often make fun of them, and plenty of kids and even many adults are afraid of clowns. Shouldn't we consider clown horror movies like It and stuff as hate speech and discrimination against clowns? Shouldn't they be a protected class of people since they put on costumes to make themselves look different from what they are? Now, what's the difference? Because there are a lot of technical similarities there. But clowns have long been considered healthy family entertainment. Despite the fact that some people have a phobia of them, they are nevertheless okay for kids who aren't afraid of them. They may dance, do tricks, and tell jokes. Now, a drag queen is a guy in a costume who may dance, but what's the difference? One is targeting and grooming kids for their own fantasies, and the other is not. And if you think I'm wrong about that, show me a drag queen who has a wife with whom he's faithfully committed and doesn't perform in other venues, because that's not what we're talking about when we talk about drag queens. And, if these parents who bring their kids to these drag queen story hours, are they really that ignorant of what a drag queen is? They think, oh, this is just funny. This is cute. This is nice and family friendly. These goofy guys who dress up like women. Ha ha ha. Or they know what drag queens are, and they know what these guys do outside the library and not in front of kids. If they know what these people do, yeah, really, there is no excuse for them to bring kids and make their kids meet and get to know drag queens. Why? Just seriously, why is it necessary for a child's educational experience to have some guy dressed as a woman read the stories? Other people can read stories as we've had before in the past. Why does it have to be drag queens?
Although I have to say that there are very sketchy people that will dress up as different characters to also groom children and stuff. When I did home health care, there was a guy that was a Santa Claus at a mall, and he was very perverted and disgusting. So it definitely grossed me out. I'm like, oh, he lets kids sit on his lap. And
there's the point there. It's like, if that's who that person is, then you keep your kids away from them. Even if other people could dress up as Santa Claus and they're harmless, but the point is, if people know that's what this person is like, or those employing them, or those bringing kids to them, you don't intentionally bring it because that's what they're like,
Yeah. So, I was thinking that some of that was more obscure, and it's hard to say, all clowns or all Santa Claus people are perverted, and that's why they do that. But now with the drag queens, it's just kind of more blatant and in your face, okay, this is their intent. But it just seems like everything is just continually getting worse and more disgusting and more in your face about sinful acts. And I mean, we shouldn't be surprised that that's how it's going, but that doesn't mean we should just sit back and say, oh, it's okay, let's send our kids there, that we shouldn't stand up against it, because we need to protect our children and the people in our community.
Exactly, sweetheart. And it seems like because these are happening in Pride Month, and what's that about? Celebrating certain kind of identity and activity. And so it's like the whole point, obviously, of bringing the kids there, it's like people think they have some kind of moral, secular, religious duty to do that. Like, the reason they're bringing them for that event is because of who's reading the books. That's the whole point of it, which is, it's just ridiculous. There's no reason, they're not just going in and, whoever happens to read the books, it's cute, it's like that's the whole point of the event is who's reading the books and bringing the children specifically for these, men dressed as women who do other things other times that should have nothing to do with kids. Now, I think it's wrong for them to do what they do anyway, but keep the kids out of it and keep the kids away from these people because obviously they're after kids for trying to groom them to get them used to or possibly get to know them later or whatever. I would like to point out in passing, it's not just the fact that it's men dressing as women. It's why they do it. Because, I've seen skits or plays or something like that where a man might, for a goofy, funny skit, dress like a woman or put a wig on and mock the part of a woman, and it's all just innocent silliness and fun, like a comedy skit or something. Nothing wrong going on there. They're just, doing a goofy skit. That's not what drag queens are.
Hey, I'm Daryl, and I'm here with my wife, Karen.
What's up?
And we're the hosts of the What Are We Even Doing Here podcast, the podcast that seeks to answer the question that we've all asked, what are we even doing here? We cover topics such as marriage, family, life, and living a Christian life in this crazy world. We don't have all the answers, but we know where to look.
Subscribe to us on iTunes and follow us on SoundCloud as we seek the kingdom of God and find out what we are even doing here.
Grace and peace.
So now that we've talked about drag queens and transgender and all this gender confusion and drag queens being referred to by female pronouns and so-called transgender women who are biological men who have so-called transitioned and they get female pronouns. Drag queens are referred to as with female pronouns and people who change their physical characteristics against their biology who are also get female pronouns, and some identify as females and others don't. But so here's the question then. So just what is a female? What is a woman then? If these different types of people are referred to with female pronouns. So, sweetheart, you are a woman. I know that God created you as a woman in a biblical sense. So, could you define a woman for us?
Sure. I think it's amazing just how God created male and female.
Yeah.
Only two genders, and they are so specifically and detailed and wonderfully made. And for the female, like the definition of woman is that the woman came from the man. In Genesis 2:22, you can see God creating woman. And then looking at different dictionaries, they haven't changed their definition quite yet. I'm sure that's coming next. But Oxford, Cambridge, they state that a woman is an adult female human. I think the interesting dictionary to look at is the 1828 Webster Dictionary because he used Bible verses and scripture to kind of support the definitions throughout there. And so he said that, again, woman is an adult female human. And I thought it was interesting that he says actually a compound word. I know you pointed out like in the English that it's womb, like the womb where the baby grows, and combined with man. And that is a huge distinction between female and male, is that the female is able to bear, carry, birth, feed babies, and the male is not able to do that. I know there's been studies and experiments trying to be able to let men carry babies, but that's not how God made them. So, and biologically, every single cell in your body tells you who God made you to be. You either have 2 X chromosomes, which means you're female, or you have the X and Y, which means you're male. I know there's chromosome abnormalities that can occur, and you'll have different variations of those, but there are still abilities to distinguish what that is and who God made you. And I think one of my favorite verses that I was thinking through this was Psalms 18:30. It says, "As for God, his way is perfect. The word of the Lord is tried. He is a buckler to all those that trust in him." And I just think a lot of times with the transgender stuff and gender identity, that it's people like trying to deny that God made them who they are, that God made a mistake in how he made them or who he made them to be. And this verse is saying, no, God is perfect. And he created you to be a man. He created you to be a woman. And unfortunately, with our culture wanting to just deceive and fall into sin so much that it's confusing our children, and I mean, at very young ages, it's just so disheartening. So yeah, sorry, that was kind of a long description.
But yeah, you mentioned Genesis 1:27, where it says, "So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him, male and female created he them." So God created them male and female. And yeah, that's if you're a man or a woman, or male or female, you are that way because God created you that way. So God is the one who defines it, and mentioned the definition of a woman is an adult human female. Or watched Matt Walsh's What is a Woman documentary. And yeah, so at the end of it, after going through all the confusion and talking to all these professionals and stuff, they'd say a lot of words, but they could not answer the question for him. Sometimes they would try to avoid it, but then eventually he talks to his wife at the end and asks her the question. And then she says, "An adult human female, here, can you open this jar?" Yeah, so that's what a woman is. Certain Supreme Court justices can't answer that question because they're not biologists, but dictionaries can, and Matt Walsh's wife can, and you can.
So I have a test for you.
Scantron, essay.
Okay. This is a test to determine male and femaleness.
Oh, yeah. Nice.
Okay. So when you look at this color on the wall, what would you...
Too bad we don't have this on YouTube, but yeah. If I were to say what color that is.
Yes.
Now, I'm sure, okay, I'll say green.
Yay, you're male.
Okay, yeah. So
Okay.
So ask a woman, what color is that on the wall?
Well, it's definitely closer to like a moss green, but it could be a little bit of a sage green even. Yeah, it has a lot of the yellow hue in it, so I'm thinking that we'll go with the sage green.
Okay, there you go. There's the most scientific, technical distinction between men and women there.
Good job. You passed the male test.
Passed the male test, yeah. And you did mention chromosomal abnormalities, but as I was researching before we started recording this episode, even the affirming scientific articles said in no uncertain terms, that someone with XXY or XYY or XXYY, they're all biologically male. And so it wasn't like half male, half female or whatever. So yeah, your chromosomes do determine your gender. XX is female, and I don't know, sweetheart, is there an XXX at all? If there were, that would be female, but if you have at least one Y chromosome, you're male. Regardless of the abnormalities, you are a biological male. And so, yeah, there's still that, oh no, binary. So now, when we ask people who don't think in binaries like us, think biblically about male and female, he created them, and to ask the question, what is a woman? And we're talking about the drag queens and the transgender people. It seems like to me that Western culture has turned the word woman into nothing but a costume or some set of outward traits or expressions. Is a drag queen a woman? Well, even if the politics or some politics would say, well, they're not, why is it that article we read referred to the one drag queen with female pronouns? So if someone puts on a wig and makeup and a dress, does that make them a woman? You know...
No, sir, it does not.
And then, so-called transgender women who are biological males, whether they've transitioned or not, the current Western politics would say that they're women. So then the question then is, so just what is a woman? If you could be a biological male, but you identify as a woman, exactly what are you identifying as? Now, talking about Matt Walsh again, because he has that documentary, What is a Woman? He earlier, before making that documentary, and as part of the documentary, he showed parts of his appearance on the Dr. Phil show, where he was kind of debating transgender people there. They were not happy about his stance and his insistence that gender matches your biology and stuff. And so he proposed, he's talking about the arguments that we're told that transgender women really are women. So then the transgender people were saying, well, they are. And then he said, okay, then what is a woman? And then they're like thinking, sitting there trying to think of how to answer that. It was like, okay, so if transgender women, meaning biological men who identify as women, are women, he asks, like, so what are you identifying as? And it would become a circular argument, like, as a woman. Well, then what is that? How many times we have to ask that question? If a biological woman isn't necessarily a woman, a biological man can identify as a woman, what exactly are they identifying as? And if your answer is woman, we're just going around in circles. So what is that? In the documentary, that question caused several experts, college professors who teach gender theory, like as if they'd never heard that question before. It's the obvious intro question to their field of study. And yet then they're thinking and pausing for a while trying to figure out how to answer that simple question. But that seems to be what this gender confusion introduces, because then there's no longer an objective standard. There's no longer an objective way to define things. So all this pounding the table insistence saying transgender women are women. Well, what is a woman? Exactly what are they identifying as? If they're not men, what is a man? If they're women, well, what is a woman then?
So I think it's kind of weird that they don't want to answer that, because, the definition of a woman is an adult female human. Yeah. So can't they just say that now they're an adult female human and just answer it? Because
they have to claim that your biology might not match your gender. That's the whole point of this thing, And so some haven't transitioned, and so-called transitioning might involve different stages, like taking puberty blockers or, having surgeries that remove some matter or try to have some
Like reconstructive.
Yeah, reconstructive surgery, or, maybe a facelift, maybe a plastic surgery in your face to make it look more feminine, or, there's even gender changes, in their body that isn't really, it's kind of more like a fake type thing, like to try to look more, but it still doesn't function. There's lots of horror stories about that and health problems for that. Biological men having surgeries to try to make them appear more like a woman, in their gender features, but, it's like a cheap imitation that doesn't even act in a way, and it gives them health problems and stuff, So exactly, then what is a woman? And what are the people who identify as women? What is that? What are they identifying as? Well, it seems like it's some kind of, as I said, costume, stereotype, outward appearance and traits and stuff. Like, it's not a holistic type thing. It's only a perception, which seems to be Western culture. Like, everything is how you get other people to perceive you, and not something that defines you from your innermost person to your whole self.
Don't you think that's kind of where a lot of the confusion comes from? Because they're trying to be something that their whole core is not.
Oh, yeah.
So it's almost going against their innate truth, I guess. I don't know how to describe that, but it just seems like, so many people are confused when they're trying to figure out the whole gender identity thing, and it's like, okay, no wonder, because God made you to be a certain way, and then when you're trying to contradict who God made you to be, then it is going to be confusing, because God is not the creator of confusion, but he wants us to know what truth is. He wants us to know the right path, what right and wrong is. He wants us to have peace. He wants us to have clarity. And it makes you have compassion for people that are going through this in a way, because it's just so evident of how much they need Christ in their life and how much they're like fighting against God made them who they are.
The definitely sweetheart.
So next time we'll have to talk a little bit more about some of the amazing characteristics that God made in males and females, and just how distinct, like down to, of course, like each cell is distinct in males and females, but there's so much that God made in us to say, okay, this is how a female functions and this is how a male functions, and he did that with purpose, and it makes everything work. And I don't know, I think it's amazing to research all that. And then I think you have something to add for our next episode too that's a little more disheartening, I guess.
Yeah, because I mentioned like surgeries that try to make people make believe that they're changed gender, but you said that to your very core, like even to the chromosomes, to your cell structures, like every tiny little component of you, all the building blocks of you, and all the, as we'll talk about later, how many the differences there are between male and female. Like, it's not a costume, it's not just an outward perception of makeup and a wig and stuff. It's not just trying to look a certain way. Male and female are defined in such a way that it, from the macro to the micro of your being to the cells, it's incredible just how much God in nature says, you are a male in here, 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 and here, and everywhere, and you are a female down to the cell. I just want to read a few Bible passages to talk about women, in the Bible, how God thinks of women, like not some goofball wearing a dress and a wig and reading stories to kids. This doesn't fit the description of what is a woman, in the Bible. So Proverbs 31, where Solomon or King Lemuel here writes who can find a virtuous woman, for her price is far above rubies, in verse 10. Verse 26 says, she openeth her mouth with wisdom, and in her tongue is the law of kindness. These are womanly traits. I think that this is the way God designed for women, from their biology to their traits, that they would demonstrate, not like the dancing, cross-dressing freaks, but, verse 28, her children arise up and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praiseth her. That's what I would say from the Bible goes along with the definition of what is a woman. Describes the personality, the manifestation of the traits of a woman. And verses 30 through 31, comparing that to what we've read earlier. Favor is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman that feareth the Lord, she shall be praised. Give her of the fruit of her hands, and let her own works praise her in the gates. Not the works of, dancing in front of children in a bar, or putting on gothic-like makeup to try to put on this display of a certain perception of women from perverted men. That's not what the Bible says about women. It's not a costume. It's the works of her hands that are praiseworthy, and that her husband and children praise her. That's how the Bible describes womanhood. And do the drags and the transgender people, do they try to emulate that as their identity of being a woman? Speaking wisdom, being praised by husband and children, and beauty is vain in this sense, not the worldly wisdom of trying to express so-called beauty and getting people to have some kind of attraction, with a costume and stuff. But let her works praise her. So we hope that we've given some food for thought as we've continued Pride Month coverage and looking at some articles, and stay tuned for the next episode of Truth Espresso as we look more at the confusion of Pride Month and its war on women and children and the family and the Bible. And
happy post Father's Day.
Oh yes,
Father's Day was yesterday.
Oh yeah, as you're listening to this, as we're recording this is Saturday night, but as you're listening to this, it's at least the Monday after Father's Day. So we hope that you had a good Father's Day.
Yes, and happy Father's Day to you, babe. You're an awesome dad to our kiddos and a great husband to me. So thank you.
Thank you, sweetheart, and you're an awesome wife and mother, and you are a true woman, according to the Bible.
And you are a true male.
Yes.
You can see green.
I can see green and moss green. And
Aw, I love you.
I love you, sweetheart, and God bless.
Thank you for waking up with Truth Espresso. Good morning, and God bless your day.
Hey friends, Daniel Minnick here again. If you liked waking up to this episode of Truth Espresso, I would really appreciate it if you would rate it on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or whatever application you use to listen to Truth Espresso.